Hey there guys, I'm Jack and this is Raw Tropical Living. Thanks for joining me today. By now you probably know my roommate Amanda. We were having a conversation. I'm just going to jump right into this one this morning. We were having a conversation this morning and I was like, well, let's just roll this into a video because it's interesting, like our back and forth. Like she's got a lot of the scientific information, so I'm always asking her like kind of to explain things to me in a way that I can understand the science part of it. So I thought this was a perfect one because I've talked about this subject before. So anyhow, today we're going to talk about the raw food diet and food addictions. Guys, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, I'd appreciate it if you go down and hit the subscribe button, then click on the little bell and check send notifications so you'll stay subscribed to the channel. Yes, like I say, we were talking about, and let me preface by saying, like, I like to dig, and I'm into semantics and things like that. I know in the past, like, people have gotten mad because I'll kind of bust balls and throw shade a little bit at the food addiction thing, but it's not like I don't believe in it. It's not like I don't believe people. I just think it's kind of like with weight loss and a number of issues. I think it's over-reported sometime, and also I have to have credible sources. I'm sorry, that's just me. I'm not good with, just like random people on the internet, random people on social media making comments and saying, well, I do this. I'm like, I don't know you. But when I know people and I know kind of like who they are and I look at them as credible, I tend to think about it a little bit more. And I've, in the past, I've heard Melissa talk about food addiction, and Amanda's told me a little bit about food addiction. So basically, I'm going to kind of just let her explain what, in your words, what is food addiction?
Okay, and I'm definitely prepared for some devil's advocate scenarios coming up because whatever we talk about, he likes to poke holes at things and be like, okay, but what if this and what if this? But it makes for a really good conversation because you really kind of get the full scope that way.
And you people shouldn't be afraid to do things like this because we don't do things the same. We disagree about certain things, but we have good conversations and we don't like get all mad with each other because we think differently. So great way to share information. So also not a psychologist, not a doctor, not a nutritionist. I have none of those things. I have some family history to varying degrees on both sides of my family. I think a lot of family members who I sort of grew up around, and again to varying degrees because some of them are relatives and so maybe I didn't see them as often, but I consider several, if not quite a few people in my family to have varying degrees of food addiction. And I think that to a degree that was maybe a behavior that I picked up at a pretty young age in terms of whenever we did something right or did something well or got like an A on a test, it was kind of like the thing to go get like an ice cream cone at McDonald's, or like you were rewarded with food to a degree. And my mom did a pretty good job of keeping a lot of types of junk food out of the house on a like consistent basis, but that made those special treats kind of all the more like exciting or almost like taboo in some ways. So I think that there was maybe just sort of a seed planted of rewarding myself that way or some level of emotional eating that way, because it could also go that direction if we had a really, really bad day, just okay, well, maybe you can have a cookie for a snack before you do your homework kind of a thing. So I think that seed was kind of planted at a younger age, and I think that's totally normal. Like most people, most families do that. I don't think that there's inherently anything wrong with it. I just think that it can sort of plant a seed for later issues depending on how the person develops. So well, kind of like a lot of things, it seems like there's good intentions, but it does it does some wiring in the brain of expectations and when to expect food, and like sometimes maybe just it can wire us for bad habits down the road. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, if my mom is watching this, Mom, you're the sweetest. This isn't anything that you did wrong. So as I grew older, there are different things that happened with our family. My parents got divorced. There were people that I dated that had like good and bad habits that I responded to in different ways or picked up on or took on for myself for different lengths of time. So I remember And also, I would add that pretty much everything in life, in my opinion, occurs on some kind of a spectrum. So when I say the words food addiction, I think that there are people who, and I've been to OA meetings, I mean, it is a very real thing. There are people who literally go into debt because they can't stop buying food. Like, that kind of thing exists. That wasn't quite what I experienced, although there were definitely times where I was like, okay, my bank account is at this amount. This is way too low for me to be buying this amount of food.
Right.
And I did it anyway. Like, I could see where, if it went unchecked, that could grow into something much bigger, into some of the stories that I heard in OA. But I do think that I was not on a particularly extreme end of the spectrum. So if you are, definitely, I recommend getting more like professional help, not even just with a psychologist, but there are therapists and psychologists who have very specific experience with that issue. And my experience with OA wasn't super great, to be honest, because it was, I think that the community sense and the social aspect helped people in that sense a lot, but I think doing that without a real specific like action plan wouldn't get people anywhere. And I'm not sure that the action plan that you sort of get with a sponsor in that situation, it depends on your personality. Maybe you'll take it seriously, but maybe you need like actual more authoritative or medical guidance there, because I think food addiction can go hand in hand with a lot of other diseases. So you have to be considering those kinds of things too. So some of my experiences though, like one of my earliest experiences I think that I can remember that was particularly like, that was definitely some food addiction like tendency showing up there, was maybe when I was like 18 or, yeah, around 18, I had gotten in some argument with my boyfriend at the time, and we were down at his parents' house, like visiting his family, and we had been out drinking underage, and there was some argument that we got in that night. And I don't know if it was the same night, but somewhere around those couple of days, I think it might have even been that same night, my mom's mom, my grandmother, passed away. And I felt extreme guilt for not being there. And then I was like, man, I'm with this jerk here. Like, why was I not there? Why am I with this idiot? And I think he passed out because he was drunk. And I just stayed up with like my thoughts, and there was a box of chocolate chip cookies like from Publix. I don't know how many of you guys know the Publix chain. It's very Floridian, but there was a box of chocolate chip cookies from the Publix bakery, and I ate like literally the whole box to myself in that one sitting that night. And it was extra embarrassing because it was at somebody else's house, like somebody else's family. They didn't even know me that well. But the amount of just like emotion that was going through me and placating it with just like cookie after cookie after cookie. And you don't feel good. Like you feel very full or even like nauseous. Like it's so much sugar, so much butter. You're kind of sick. But you can't really stop eating because you do, like, there is a sense of control that you lose over it. And I also would get into the mindset of, like, because I would work out a lot. There was probably some, like, exercise-based bulimia kind of thing that went on around then. I was anorexic for, like, 2 weeks randomly in high school. It wasn't super long, but I had all of these issues because I was very focused on body image at that age. I think a lot of young girls are. So even with all of that, you can kind of, when you're in that bottomless pit mindset, it's almost like you could continue eating forever. And because you're trying to fill a void in a sense that's coming from something else entirely. I mean, at that moment I was feeling guilty and extremely unloved, and I was trying to fill it with cookies. Like, they're just not even related. But due to sort of the body image issues that I had, I would get in this mindset where if I did eat that much at any one point, like during the day, it would be like, okay, well, today's a total waste. Let me eat all the things I'm not allowing myself in all these other days, because there was a lot of calorie restriction happening. So all the things that I'm not letting myself eat, let me fit all of those into that one day. Or even sometimes that would turn into like this 1 week. And then next week I'll be better, or tomorrow I'll be better. And there's all kinds of things that I would try to do to counteract it, like over-exercising or under-eating the following day. So it has ties in so many things. I mean, emotional eating and calorie restriction are two big ones. It turns into, in that sense, like the restrict binge kind of cycle. But there are, it's just for me, I describe it as like an addictive tendency there.
It's funny that the things you're mentioning there, I can identify to a certain extent with that, because, I was like complicated drunk throughout the years. I was a drunk, but I stayed fairly fit and kind of buff and fit looking, and I would get into the gyms and I would do that same thing of like, if I ate something bad, what I considered bad during the day, I'd be just like, oh, right, well, screw it, I messed up this day, and I could throw down some serious calories. And then I would have that mentality, okay, now for a week I have to exercise extra, do some cardio, restrict what I'm eating for a week. So I can identify with some of those behaviors. I don't identify any emotions behind them, though, because I can't really say, that might be more complicated for me. I mean, like I say, I was a hard partier at that time and a lot of things going on, but I was fairly happy, and I wasn't hungover or something, but I did have some of that behavior. So, and I think she said something key about it, there being a spectrum there, and we were talking about that earlier. And like I say, I can be a semantic, into really the semantics of words sometimes. So that, like there being a spectrum, I can understand that, I can grasp that a little bit better. But it's also, too, the chemical part of it. You're kind of talking more behavioral part there. I will say this part of it. It's like anything else. It's like if you've ever tried to quit smoking or whatever, the longer you can go without putting the substance back into your mouth, the easier it is. So each time I can relate there that, you're re-putting that into your mouth and you keep wanting it over and over. If you can hold out even, after 3 days, it's easier not to put that in your mouth. After a week, it's easier. So I do see commonalities with other addictive behavior in there. So I do sort of kind of starting to understand a little bit more.
Yeah, there's all kinds of information that I find fascinating around like neuroplasticity and the way that our neurons sort of wire themselves to do the things that we do the most, to do those things the most and the most efficiently. So the more that you do something, whatever that thing is, the more that your neurons are going to be wired to continue doing that thing. And especially if you're eating something like cheese or highly processed foods with all kinds of crazy chemicals in them.
It's rewarding something up in there each time. In other words, it's like the chicken that does something for a treat, where they make a ding. Each time you do that, you're the chicken getting rewarded, and you're like, you feel something.
Yeah.
And probably some sort of a chemical reaction is released from that.
Yeah, so there's a very real chemical element to it as well that you can experience. It's called The Pleasure Trap, that book by, I believe, Dr. Doug Lisle. He is a psychologist. I think that he's done some work with either Dr. Foreman or even True North at some point. Maybe it was True North, actually. Yeah, it was True North. But yeah, his book is fantastic in terms of explaining how, as like the human species, we're wired to go after things that have certain tastes because that's what led us to go eat, which kept us alive. And now that we have access to all of these processed foods all of the time, even the vegan processed food, because there's quite a lot of it out there now.
Yeah, definitely.
You can get your hands on some vegan cookies real easily in a lot of places, maybe not everywhere, but yeah, those things they're hyper palatable. They've got a ton of sugar, a ton of oil, and typically a ton of salt all added in, and that's a really easy way to sort of overwhelm your taste buds, because then if you eat that and then go have an apple, how sweet does that apple taste? It doesn't really taste like much. It's kind of bland. But if you're really hungry and go have an apple, then it tastes a good bit better. The other thing is that our taste buds change. I have to check, but I think it's something like it takes between 2 and 3 weeks, I think. There was I think that there's maybe some debate because I've seen like a range of how regular they change, but if you start adjusting some of your eating behaviors, if you just give yourself enough time, you will actually crave that green juice. I mean, I do. You will crave some kale, you'll crave an apple, whatever it is you're eating, bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just taking that a level further, I would have never thought, 10 years ago that just a one fruit meal would excite me and actually satisfy me like it does, because your taste buds become a little bit more pure, and you just do appreciate that more. And you've also gotten rid of that connection, or at least partly. Maybe, I don't know if you ever totally get rid of the connection or the desire. How would you frame this? Like, do you find it easier within a vegan framework, or if you're in the eating a raw food diet?
For me, and I think you mentioned, I've seen some of Lissa's videos, and I've consulted with Lissa on this before. She talks about maybe like a slippery slope with cooked, even vegan food for her. I feel that way. I feel like so Crohn's is a pretty big reason why I eat high fruit, but you can still eat high fruit and not necessarily eat raw. Like, you can go more of a raw till 4 kind of direction.
Right.
But for me, that extra step of just trying to be, I would never say 100%. Like, I have things like cashews or nutritional yeast. Sometimes, like, there's things that are debatable as to whether or not they're raw. Or maybe I'll use some PB2 powder on occasion, which is totally a processed food, but when it's just like a teaspoon of it, like 2 times a week, and some banana ice cream because I just really like the flavor and don't really want the fat, because I have had some weight to lose this year since some hormonal issues. It's not the biggest deal. Like, that kind of thing keeps me like in that like 90-95% like mostly raw area, and that for me has been the best for sort of my addictive tendencies towards food, because if I'm eating cooked, like the last place I was living, there was a vegan restaurant that I discovered that was kind of far away, really expensive, but I would order delivery from it because I've worked remotely for like 8 years, so I chose not to own a car because it just doesn't make sense if you're not using it regularly. So I would order food delivery from this place, and it was like stupid expensive. And they had, it was amazing, and it was vegan food, but it was not healthy, like vegan cheeseburgers and stuff. And right before I moved here, there was a place that had opened up a few months ago that was like, it was a hot dog place, and it wasn't vegan, but they had vegan hot dogs, which was really cool. I'm really glad that these kinds of things are being offered. But I did get those like probably 2 or 3 times before I went and decided like, okay, I really just need to do this raw thing. And it's not for all of the reasons I thought before. It's because I've got these addictive tendencies where if I have, for some reason, if I have sweet potatoes a few times, it's like I can have vegan hot dogs then. And it's...
I think that's an extrapolation of what I've talked about in the past of when I went vegan and like, eating the pizza and whatever. It's like you've defined, like, this is your food. In other words, you have your food, and that's not your food anymore. And that was what I kind of talked about, even just for people that go vegan, if they're struggling with it. It was just like I defined, okay, this is my food now, this is not my food now. So even those things that I really wanted in the past, they were just eliminated as an option, and that made it a lot easier to even deal with some of the things that I used to kind of have that, snack, those munchies for at night, just by defining, just like that, nope, I'm vegan now, and boom, I can't have that pizza, I'm not going to have this or that.
I think for me, the body image issues run deep for me. So like, when I first went vegan, I had lost quite a bit of weight. I had also lost weight to some degree due to just the Crohn's itself, because there was like a week where I didn't eat anything because I was in so much pain. So I water fasted on accident for like a week. But maybe about 2 years in, I started dating someone and they ate vegan, but they ate a very different kind of vegan than I did. And that was when I kind of started questioning my style of veganism, I guess. And I definitely put on maybe about like 5 pounds around then. And then after we broke up, over the course of a few years, it was like, okay, the first year maybe 5 more pounds, the second year like 10 pounds, and the third year it was like 15 pounds, like out of nowhere. And I was like, okay, I don't feel like myself anymore. Some hormone issues had developed at that point, which I think was closely linked to some stressful things that were just, it's been a crazy time even before COVID started for my family. It's been an intense couple of, just an intense year, really, like even before COVID. So trying to get that under control, but having so many deep-rooted body image issues. I did start journaling, like not food journaling, journaling to like help figure out my thoughts and my emotions, because it just, those were tied to a lot, because I had to let go of the body image issues to a degree to be able to find like peace and health, because if I was constantly prioritizing that over just being healthy, I really wasn't going to get to where I wanted to be anyways. So I think a big factor for me was eating enough calories once, because I think in the past maybe, or even if I had tried to do it within the last year, I was so focused on weight loss that I was just paranoid about eating enough calories. I just, above all else, I just wanted to lose that weight that I had gained because I didn't feel like myself anymore. So I think I had to let that go, and I had to focus on doing what was healthiest for me. And once I started doing that, it was easier to be consistent. And once it was easier to be consistent, I started losing weight. So that was, and I also got rid of my scale because I realized that I had started doing more muscle building exercises, which I definitely didn't do when I first went vegan. I like literally only did cardio then. But as I've gotten older, I'm realizing if I only do cardio, sure, I'm thin, but I'm like kind of like wobbly.
Right.
Like I'm not as toned as I want to be. So doing the muscle building exercises, the scale just wasn't as important in terms of if I wanted to gauge my progress. It wasn't
Right.
really important for gauging my progress. So I have no idea what I weigh now, but I do know that the clothes that I wear now are more like what I was wearing in the first 2 years of going vegan.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Well, what would you, just kind of wrap it up, like, I know you're not giving specific advice to any one person, but do you have some general advice you would give to people that think they're really dealing with
Well,
food addiction?
Yeah, a big part of it is just being even aware. Like, I think that because it's such a spectrum, part of me assumed that couldn't really be what I was dealing with because it wasn't on such an extreme end. But I think that accepting that it can happen in like lesser degrees, and that there could just maybe be a tendency there, and that even when it's that small, it's still worth addressing and seeing, like, maybe you're fine with whole food plant-based, but there's just very specific foods that are more like triggers for you.
Right.
If you can at least define those, identify those, and cut those out, I do think that avoidance is a lot easier than trying to do moderation in that regard. I do know some people who have done the intuitive eating route, and moderation does work for them. But if I'm being honest with myself, which is all that really matters there, it doesn't work for me.
It tends to be like trying to smoke 3 cigarettes a day or something. It's a tough to do.
Yeah, so that would really be my number one piece of advice, is to just get honest with yourself and be open enough with yourself and kind enough with yourself for something that is even just a small tendency to mean enough for you to see what you can do about it. Or if you want to do something about it, maybe you don't, like, maybe it's not worth it to you to do anything, and that's fine too. So do that, and if you're struggling with that, I would definitely recommend journaling. Once I started doing that on sort of a regular basis, I could feel when I needed to give myself that attention, and I would be able to go back and
That's
do
a
that.
good point. I bet you can figure, not even just for that, I bet you can figure out a lot of stuff journaling. you know,
Yeah.
for a lot of different issues just by processing.
Yeah, it's a very very good self-soothing practice. I didn't have those skill sets even just like 3 or 4 years ago. I was never good at self-soothing.
Right.
I have a very supportive mother. She is amazing. I was not good at self-soothing, so that is a skill that I've developed a little bit more, especially since Bond passed away last year. That took certain things that were already developing and just like amplified them. Bond was my dog, my furry best friend. So I think if you just start there, other than that, the situations between different people are very, very unique. So certainly find things that work for you. Find community if that works for you. Find a therapist if that works for you. But just be open to doing the small adjustments that do make sense for you, or accepting if you don't want to do any of those adjustments. It's totally fine.
Cool. Well, that's good. That's a great explanation there. And listen, guys, don't ever assume anything about me. Like I say, I have my process. I like to dig. I like to poke. I like to be skeptical about things. But one thing that's different about me, you can change my mind on almost anything. You can educate me on everything. So that's something that always annoys me with other people, and why I don't connect and communicate with people very much, because I don't get that whole, like, you know, if you can show me if I'm completely wrong, I'm completely wrong. If I'm a little bit wrong, I'm a little bit wrong. I try not to have that ego about holding on to ideas. I mean, you know, like I say, for me, that word journey is overdone. Everybody's on their journey. But for me, my journey has really just kind of been me seeking these things, evolving, and having that open mind to take in new knowledge. Because whatever it is in life, if you don't have an open mind to take in new knowledge, you are limiting yourself so much. There's people out there that we can learn all kind of things from. So just my 2 cents there. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like it, please give us a thumbs up, and I'll see you again later this week. Peace.